Hi, today is the 3rd of January in New Zealand, 2018. Wow, amazing. I've lived that long. So today I want to talk about the childbirth myth about the word birth support. I really think about whether I'm out of date in the sense that you look at me and say, oh, you're not of our generation, so you have nothing to say. Everything has to keep moving, be contemporary, be modern, or whether you understand that I've lived long enough to see so many changes in childbirth that I really feel that I have the expertise to be able to talk about the myths and deconfuse the conversation in childbirth that's really existed since I had my last child when I was 39 in 1982. So it's really important for me to get this legacy content out into the global community, because if I don't, there aren't going to be people who do it, because there have been people who've taken sides around childbirth since I got involved really in the 1970s. And that's something that I and the families that I worked with didn't want to get involved in. Everybody wanted to have an empowered birth for their baby, and that was it. And we had to find a way to do that. And prior to the 1980s, we didn't have choices. So what were we left with? Well, how do you become empowered when you don't have choices? And we did that through becoming skilled. So what happened when we did have choices? If we relied on our choices, then they changed. It was as simple as that. Birth plans fell apart instantaneously. Or the most depressing part of it was women had a whole long list of the things they wanted and didn't want, and then 6 months later, they didn't care. Or 9 out of 10 things went their way, and the one thing that didn't, they were pissed off about for years. So we found that birth plans were incredibly unreliable. And that was true for people that didn't have choices. They lived in communities where there weren't a lot of choices, or they had medical issues that didn't permit them to have the birth that they would have liked, or medical issues came up and things had to be decided right away. So the question was, how do you empower yourself? And we did it through skills. And this brings us to this childbirth myth about the word birth support. Because when I gave birth in 1970, we used the word birth coach, both Lamaze and the Bradley method. In fact, the Bradley method was husband-coached childbirth, right? And even that, the Grantley-Dick-Read method that was used in New Zealand in the 1950s to the 70s also used the word birth coach, but fathers weren't permitted in the birth at that point. So they trained specific birth coaches to coach women through the breathing and relaxation exercises. So once again, I want to emphasize that the three obstetricians, Grantley-Dick-Read, Lamaze, and Bradley, were caring male obstetricians. So much for the belief that men don't care about childbirth, or that obstetricians are running around with knives trying to cut us open. That's just not accurate. They were seeing that birth was becoming more standardized as medical care, and there was good reasons. They knew that women died of childbirth fever. They knew that babies died. They knew that women suffered through long labors, because cesareans were very dangerous and very major surgeries. So these three caring male obstetricians began to look at skills. As I've said in other videos, the problem is that they directed those skills towards women who wanted to have natural birth or less medical care and wanted to have pain-free labors. And the reason that the skills-based approach to childbirth in New Zealand fell apart, and the reason it fell apart in the United States and other countries that had Lamaze and Bradley, was that not enough women achieved those three goals. And so we have to then start to ask, what's the goal of all of this? What is the goal in childbirth? To have a few women achieve something that is hard to achieve, or is it to have everybody empowered by their baby's birth? Birthing Better families chose the latter. Why shouldn't we? It's our baby's birth. We want to be empowered by our baby's birth. It's full stop. There's no and, or, but ifs. That's it. So Birthing Better was always developed by families for all births. And we use the word birth coach. And the reason we did it was because as mothers and fathers, or as partners, or as other, The other person wanted to know how to help us. And that's the operative word, help us. So I posted on our Birthing Better Facebook page a list of interventions that New Zealand midwives gave us as we run the Strengthening the Partnership workshops. Long list of interventions women have to avoid in order to have a natural birth. But we also posted a list of what is considered by New Zealand midwives and many natural birth advocates around the world and other midwives who are into natural birth, what the ideal birth would look like. And that's a long list as well. So are those things really achievable as a long list? Well, that's fantasy. So we have to stop doing that. But what I did eventually, which I will do probably not today, but maybe tomorrow, is to rearrange those lists as to what I have heard from women around the world. I've talked to tens and thousands of people about what is really important to them. And so that whole list, both lists, the intervention list and the ideal birth list, it all boils down to really one thing. What do we want as women? What do you want as a woman? And that is some control. It's as simple as that. As soon as we get pregnant, we feel we lose control. And we do. We're sharing our body with another human being. And we can't control much of pregnancy. So we try to have control. The skills-based approaches in the 50s in New Zealand to the 70s, and then the 60s through the 80s in the United States and perhaps other countries, were about giving women skills in order to control not necessarily the birth process, but their response to birthing. That was as simple as that. But the goals were to achieve a normal, less medical birth and pain-free labor. That was not able to be controlled. Our behaviors can be controlled, but external circumstances can't be. And how painful our labor is can't be controlled either. When birth plans came in, that was a control issue. If women knew what they wanted about birth, and as I said in the last one, of course we do. We want a simple, easy birth with a good outcome. It's as simple as that. Or we're willing to work hard to some degree, but not too hard. When it becomes too hard, it becomes unmanageable. And I have a friend in Holland who says that she's now working with doulas who want women to stop having to tough it out in birth. Tough it out in birth is a phrase that says women are trying to control birth. So what do you want them to do? Freak out? Be overwhelmed? Toughing it out is telling you they lack skills and they're doing their best to stay in control. So when we use the word coach, we meant it. We wanted somebody who had the skills to help us stay in control and stay on top of the internal sensations we had if pain was intense. So contractions don't always start intense. They start very manageably. And we often hear people say, oh, the early part of labor was fine. The contractions weren't intense. And when they got really painful and really intense, I lost the plot. And when you listen to the Channel Moms videos, which are amazing, I will promote them forever. Because at the end of each video, that woman who tells her birth story says to you, please put your birth story here. Tell people about it. So there are some things that we need to continue to talk about birth stories. And almost none of those birth stories included really any type of help that the fathers had. A lot of them talked about how the women felt out of control, and the midwives in the UK, where they are, said to them, get it together, you're out of control. What's that saying? That's saying we don't have skills, oh, for goodness sakes. So birth coaches have skills. You have to share a set of skills. And Dick Grantley-Reed, Lamaze, and the Bradley Method all focused on having the father or other person be skilled as well. Those skills didn't always work because they weren't deeply developed the way that Birthing Better is, because they were developed by one individual each rather than the collective of hundreds of fathers and mothers. But that's beside the point. The point is that a coach is a person who learns skills with you, and they see your birth, whether it's a labor, a non-laboring cesarean, or a labor and an unplanned cesarean, as an activity you're doing, and they're helping you stay on top of that activity. That's really important for you to understand what a coach does. A coach actually helps you, knows how to help you, knows when to help, can hear and see when to help. So what does a birth support do? And that the coach word shifted between the 70s and the 80s. We don't want men to coach. We don't want them to sit on the sideline like they do at a football or a soccer team and tell women, push, push, push. We don't want that. We want men to support women's choices, and we want them to protect women's birthing space. You know what? That's impossible to ask a man to do. He's never going to stand up really to a professional. That isn't going to happen. And he doesn't know what protect a woman's birth space. And we don't know what that means either. Because along with some of these changes came these myths around childbirth. Women have to feel safe to give birth. That's nuts. And we know it. Women around the world have always given birth in the most challenging situations. Women can't always provide a safe environment. There are many women who don't live in a safe home or even don't know what safe means. So some women going to the hospital doesn't feel safe. Some women being at home doesn't feel safe. Or there's a war, there's a famine, there's a drought. There's abuse in the family. There's alcoholism. There was a tsunami in Indonesia. What are we saying? There's a forest fire somewhere and a woman's giving birth. We can't say that women need to feel safe to give birth. And we can't have fathers or others trying to create a safe space. We need fathers and others to help women cope, manage, deal with, handle, work through, stay on top, and stay in control. We need men and others to know how to work with women. You can call it anything you want, but they need that. They can't be sitting there saying, my wife or partner or this woman wanted this, in her birth plan, and I'm going to support her birth plan. Do you know how many women have said to men, I don't want pain relief? And they get into labor, they lack skills, somebody either suggests an epidural or they ask for an epidural, and that support person says, she doesn't want an epidural, and the woman turns around to him and says, F off. You don't know what it's like. And that causes damage in a relationship. Imagine instead that person being able to see and hear right away whether she needs help. Now, I get asked all the time, what do you talk about skills? And so I did a thing yesterday about childbirth information, childbirth education, childbirth knowledge, and childbirth skills. Information is about what you know, about the how and about the what and the why. But the skills are the how to do something. That's important. So how can a partner see or hear whether a woman is coping? Okay, doesn't matter whether she's driving to the hospital for a cesarean or in labor. Okay, if a woman has a relaxed forehead, and I don't because I have too many wrinkles on it. Okay, so if her forehead's relaxed, then you can assume she is coping. You do not know what she's thinking. So our mind can think very negative things, but the woman is focused on. And focused is another word for using a skill. If you hear her and she's sounding like this, or like this, or like this, she is focusing, using a skill to manage whatever sensation she's feeling. You don't know what she's thinking. She can have terrible thoughts like, this is so painful, but I'm going to manage well. But if you hear her doing this, she is not coping. So you have to have skills to help right away, to coach right away. And when do you help right away? Right away. So if she goes from nah to help right away. If she goes from to help right away. You need skills. Sure, we are promoting Birthing Better skills. Why shouldn't we? We're a charitable trust. All the sales goes back to the charitable trust to help you birth better. So But you can use anything as long as you use it and as long as you coach. So do you want to support her choices? Sure, within reason. But boy, you need to know what is important to her and what isn't. And what you're planning before the birth is going to look very different during the birth. So you need to find a way to communicate that. Those are communication skills. We have them. They're both nonverbal and verbal. So we'll talk about it. So we hope you've learned one small skill today, how to hear and read whether a woman needs help. Because I want to tell you, I have been at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of births with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of practitioners, midwives, doulas, obstetricians, staff midwives, obstetrical nurses, GPs, everybody. I have been at hundreds and hundreds of births over 45 years, and I can tell you that 99.9% of all birth professionals think that however a woman behaves in birth is fine. They don't care. Honestly, if they can give her pain relief, they'll do it. And sometimes they will say to a woman, get it together. But mostly, they're very tolerant. And do you know why? Because they see very few skilled families. And because the message around childbirth is that if a woman is looking like this, she's either lucky, having an easy birth, or she's being very intuitive. And the reality is she is being highly skilled and choosing very carefully how she is breathing and how she internally relaxes. Okay, so that's my talk for today. See you another day. And please pass this on, like our page, grow our Birthing Better community, and for goodness sake, become skilled and give the gift of skills to anyone you know who's pregnant now. Bye-bye.